see at the bottom of your screen, there is an icon that you can access us there, and we'll also send a link through the chat function. So any of your questions and your comments, engagement with today's event, please put it through the chat function, which you can see on the right of your screen, and we will feed them back into our panel discussion at the end of the event. Today, we want to say huge thanks to BAI for their support for this event through their Sectoral Development Fund. So I'm just going to go through the running order. So today sorry, can you share that? Orla, can you forward there? Oh, hi, sorry, bit of a technical glitch there. So today we're going to hear from Sarah Brunet and Ana Caceres Ramirez, the policy officers from the EU Commission. We're going to hear from Lesley McKimm, the project manager from Screen Ireland. We'll hear from Olwen Dawe, the project lead on the Equality, Human Rights and Diversity Policy of the Arts Council of Ireland. And then we'll come back for a panel discussion at the end, moderated by Lian Bell, the campaign director of Waking the Feminist movement. So just to talk a little bit about the desk itself, the Creative Europe desk in Ireland, we have 3 offices: the media office in Dublin, the media office in Galway, and we have the culture office in Dublin. We are the national contact point for the Creative Europe programme. We provide information, advice and technical assistance. We work with programme events across the year, workshops and seminars around the Creative Europe programme itself, and we promote successful projects and activities. I'm going to hand you over now to Orla.
Hello, everybody. Sorry about all those technical glitches that were my fault. Okay, so thank you very much, Aoife. So I'm Orla Clancy. I'm with the Creative Europe Desk Media Office. So I'm just going straight into the next program, which is the 2021 to 2027. We'd love to be able to tell you at the moment that that it's all being launched and that there are deadlines soon, but unfortunately we can't. So we are in the final stages of negotiation. There's a bit more to go yet, so hopefully it'll be launched in the second quarter of 2021. That's looking that's the way it's going to be at the moment. But the good news is that there is an increased budget. So the last 7-year program had a 1.46 billion, and this program is 2.2 billion. Which is it's a third increase, so that is great news. And I know that the first couple of years there's going to be a bit more funding. It's going to be front loaded. Funding is going to be front loaded in the first couple of years, and to help with the consequences of the COVID pandemic. So the desks between now and the launch, we are working to raise awareness and to build capacity in the sector to be ready to apply. So as desks, we're still here. So, you know, and to help you guys get started with your applications. And even though there's no guidelines yet, there is still a lot of work that you can be doing in getting ready. So seeing as that this event is on gender equality, there is a new horizontal policy focus on gender equality and climate. And there's going to be a continuing emphasis on social inclusion, intercultural dialogue, and individual artist mobility. So there's also going to be continued support for targeted sectoral approach on music and theatre as well. So yeah, so exciting program coming up for the next 7 years, but it was just going to be another few months to go. So, and then if we go straight in, so on the media side of it, for the last 7 years, over 70 Irish companies have been supported by Creative Europe Media here, with direct grants totaling 13 million euros. We've just hit the 13 million mark, awarded to Irish projects. And this is across development, TV production, festivals, markets, distribution, video games, training and exhibition. So it's across all areas of the sectors. And the keynote here is that development funding is 7.5 million of that 13 million between slate development and single development for projects. So development is still a very key area for Irish companies being awarded in media projects. So, and it is more than just direct project funding, because of the funding from Media and Creative Europe. A lot of Irish professionals attend training programs and markets across Europe, and that helps them to help grow their company and to build those European connections, which are vital for a sustainable company. So I'll pass you over to Katie now, who is going to bring you through the culture side of it.
Thanks, Orla. Sorry, I popped on a bit early. Surprise you. So I just give a brief overview of the last 7 years with regards to culture projects. So what we've seen over this past program has been increasing engagement from the creative and cultural sectors with Creative Europe, which is great news. So looking at the period 2014 to 2020, and actually we've just had an additional project through a reserve list. So it's actually 68 Irish organizations have been involved in Creative Europe funded projects. And this represents total project grants. So that's across all the countries involved in these projects of 45 million, with direct grant aid to Ireland of just over 5 million. And looking at the whole program, that represents just over 2.26% of the overall funding, which in essence is a very good place to be, because it's in excess of probably what we represent in terms of GDP and population. Ireland's success rate when we do apply is quite high in relative terms to the overall success rate. So that's great. And in general, we actually have quite, the projects represent quite a broad geographic diversity, which again contributes to their success. So there's partners from 34 out of a possible 41 participating countries in the program. So in addition, I've left this out, but I know there are some individual artists and cultural practitioners here. We've seen increasing engagement with Creative Europe supported networks. So what in the period 2017 to 2020, there's actually been 109 Irish artists and organizations involved as members of European networks. So that's great. And we're also represented within the literary translation strand and also support for European platforms. So overall, what we're working towards in the Culture Office is increasing this trend and kind of looking at ways that we can address capacity and help more Irish organizations and artists engage with Creative Europe. So sorry, Orla, just the next slide. So I just thought I'd include a few projects that really address or have a gender focus within them. After this event, I'll include or will include links to all of these projects so you can kind of look at them a bit deeper. But one thing you'll see when you start to look at these projects or projects like this is that gender focus is really is part of a kind of a wider context or focus on issues of inclusion, social inclusion, diversity and human rights. And the projects themselves will address a broader or wider sectoral challenge. So really that's the brilliance of these projects, is they really have a kind of multifaceted approach to them. So really interesting project here would be the WOW project. Outlandish Theatre Company is the Irish partner. And this is a project that seeks to address issues of gender equality within a theatre context. And the overall aim is to create a new model of social and economic integration of migrant, refugee and minority groups of women. So that's a really interesting one. And it's good because Outlandish Theatre Company is very small. So, you know, when you see what they've actually achieved, you know, being a relatively small company is quite amazing. So a larger scale project that some of you might be familiar with already is the Key Change project. It's a large scale project funded through cooperation project strand of Creative Europe. It's on its second iteration, and First Music Contact is the Irish partner. Now they have a very kind of large systemic goal, and that is the project is working towards a total restructure of the music industry, and it's a global network and movement that brings underrepresented genders in the music industry to the main stage. This is a really interesting project. Another one that personally I've really enjoyed and use their database all the time is the G-Book project. And again, this has been funded for the second time as well. And this is a project that is a collection of libraries and third level institutions And it's really looking at, or coming from the idea that so much of kind of gender is really acquired, kind of gender stereotypes and all of that is acquired through, through children. It's from when you're a child. And so they're actually looking at a more gender inclusive literature for children. So sorry, that's just a couple. And I think I'll leave it at that. But again, I think I'll mention the media ones, but my last point on the culture projects is I feel in some ways, and we'll see that from today, Ireland is very well positioned, for the next program because this work is going on. There's a lot of synergies here and we'll see that today. So the last two again, and we'll send these links, are 2 media training programs. And I think Sarah will go into the media side a bit more now, but these are 2 training programs that really have a strong gender equality focus within them. So that's me finished. I'll just call Aoife back now, and I think we can get into the main body of the event.
Thanks, Katie. I'm going to introduce Sarah Brunet and Anna Kaczorek. If you want to turn your cameras on there, Sarah and Anna, and we will hear from you guys on the EU Commission side of things. Good morning, Anna.
Yes, good morning. Hello all. I don't know if Sarah would like to start. I think Sarah?
She's coming on there.
Well, if she's not here, then I will start. Maybe. My name is Anna Kaczorek Ramirez, and I work in the European Commission, DG Education and Culture, in the Cultural Policy Unit. I deal with several files, but one of them is gender equality in the cultural and creative sectors. So what we do is we do not directly deal with Creative Europe program, but we rather look at the policy side. So I don't know whether Sarah would like to start the presentation and then I can jump in. Sarah?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Okay. Hello everyone. I'm Sarah. Is it working?
We can hear you, but I cannot see you personally.
Oh, apparently I have a technical problem with the camera. Can you see me? Hello?
Now I can see you.
Okay. Hello everyone, and I'm very happy to attend this webinar. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thanks to Anna to join, so we can have this double presence here to represent the European Commission. So I'm from the DG CNECT, representing the media strand, and as you may know, the cultural strand is more into DG EAC, and Anna is the ambassador of the DG EAC today. So maybe so we will share I will share the screen with our presentation, and maybe Anna, you can start with your part. Okay. So is it working now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you, Sarah. So if you actually move to the slides, okay. I will take you, I will very briefly take everyone through the developments on the policy side in the European Union as regards gender equality in general and gender equality in cultural and creative sectors in particular. So basically, as you all know, we have a new president of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, and she's very keen in bringing the gender equality issues into the fore. Gender equality, or striving for gender equality, was one of the high priorities in her political agenda. And in general, union of equality is one of the main objectives of this commission. This equality, of course, in the global sense, includes inclusion of vulnerable groups, people from minorities, disadvantaged, disabled, and of course, also ensuring gender equality on various levels. A new thing, completely new thing, which was a bit of a surprise, but a good surprise for everyone, was the fact that President von der Leyen nominated a new commissioner for equality portfolio. So this is Mrs. Dawe from Malta, and she's dealing with equality issues, which include, as I said earlier, disability, migrants, Roma populations, and I think also fight against racism is within her portfolio. Now, following the nomination of the new president, new commission, the EU, my colleagues from DG Justice worked very heavily on preparation of gender equality strategy, which was of course consulted across all the services of the Commission. And the gender equality strategy was adopted in April last year. And this is basically the very first Commission strategy in this area of equality. And it delivers on the commitment of a union of equality that I mentioned earlier. And the strategy is articulated around three main goals. First one, ensuring freedom from gender-based violence and gender stereotypes. Second, making sure that women and men have equal opportunities to thrive. And the third one, guaranteeing that women and men have equal chances to lead our European society. So now if we move to the gender equality in culture and creative sectors, I must admit that apart from media and audiovisual sectors, gender equality was not an issue which was very much under the radar of cultural policy in other sectors until recently. We in the Commission work following the so-called work plans for culture, which are negotiated by the member states for 3 or 4 consecutive years. And the current work plan for culture for the years 2019-2022 is the first one where gender equality was actually one of the priorities. But it is treated very seriously, as the member states require the Commission carries out several activities regarding gender equality in cultural and creative sectors. So first thing that we did following the adoption of the work plan is that we commissioned a study, the European Commission commissioned a study to our experts network, which was supposed to look at the situation of women artists and cultural professionals in the EU. And this study, the results, findings of this study are very interesting. I don't have time to develop it now, maybe later. But the findings of this study fed into the work of the expert group, so-called open method of coordination group that gathers experts from different member states to exchange experience, good practices, to look for common solutions, recommendations, policy recommendations, and action recommendations. The group started gathering in September last year, and we are in the process of actually coming to an end. We are now preparing a report, which will hopefully be finalized by spring, which will have very concrete recommendations addressed to policymakers and cultural institutions. By policymakers, I mean local, regional, national, and EU competent authorities. Apart from this open method of coordination expert group, the Commission also had structured dialogue with the representatives of the cultural and creative sectors. This is also something that we launched in September last year. It's called Voices of Culture. This is the sort of framework for structural dialogue that we have. And the representatives of the sector met in Prague in September 2019, had a brainstorming session to which the Commission does not participate to ensure that everyone can speak freely. And the group prepared a report, brainstorming report, which was then presented to the Commission and to the experts of the OMC group. And basically the representatives of the sector identified 4 priority issues, which according to them are the most burning ones. I don't know if you will agree with me with them, but these 4 issues are basically equal access for women to the labor market and leadership positions. The second, gender stereotypes, representation and role models, an end to sexual violence, and systemic gender discrimination. So here again, Voices of Culture report has come forward with a series of recommendations, but we will look into how they could be put in practice and whether they could also be repeated in the OMC report by the member states representatives. Apart from that, the German presidency of the Council, which is now coming to an end, but which started in July this year, had gender equality also very high on the agenda, to the extent that they proposed that Council conclusions on gender equality in cultural and creative sectors be adopted. And indeed, it was a long process of negotiations, which started in summer and has recently concluded on the 1st of December. Unfortunately, the Council conclusions turned into presidency conclusions because some member states, unfortunately, were fiercely opposed to the use of the word gender in the document. And the Council conclusions are usually adopted by consensus. In this case, unfortunately, this consensus couldn't be achieved. So the document was adopted as presidency conclusions. But still, it is a very relevant document which comes up with invitations to the member states and recommendations to the Commission on how concretely improve the situation of women in cultural and creative sectors. For the Commission, of course, we will take it very seriously and we will implement the recommendation. As for the member states, it's a bit of a peer pressure exercise. I'm not sure whether the 3 states who fiercely oppose the use of gender will diligently implement all the recommendations, but I sincerely hope that the others will do. And I firmly believe that Ireland will be one of them. So I think that's all for now from me. Thank you very much. And I will pass it over to Sarah on media and audiovisual.
Thank you very much, Anna. So we will deep into the what's been done under the media trend. So just as an introduction, back early 2019, we have started what we call a holistic agenda that we have implemented closely with the audiovisual stakeholders. And basically, we have started this structured dialogue with them. There are almost 25 audiovisual stakeholders that we are working with, representing all the value chain. And the first step was to have more data, to have more transparency into this issue, and to have more detail on the problems and on the gap, of course. So at the Berlinale 2019, we have gathered all the stakeholders, and there was also the European Audiovisual Observatory and Eurimage. And we have published exclusive data on the media program. So as you can see on the PowerPoint presentation, basically we apparently there is almost 30% of female accessing to applicating, to the media schemes, and the male are 70%. But when we go deeply into all schemes, it looks like female applicants have some equivalent access as male. So there is less female accessing applicating but when we go to schemes to another, it looks like it's about 50-50. So after having done this work on data collection, we wanted to go deeply into good practices into that sector. And we have done a consultation collecting good practices all around Europe. And so we have made this overview that we have published in Cannes in 2019 during an event that we have launched called Women on the Move. And also, so we have dedicated an entire day on this issue, and with organizing roundtables and also doing some networking events. And we also did a video that you can see on YouTube focusing on women talent. So that's it for this presentation. We have also done some special partnership with some organization in the sector. So there was one with the Collective 50/50 that you may know, all of you, I don't know, but it's a French-based collective, non-profit organization. And they were the ones starting to do this pledge with all the festivals around the world, asking for 50/50 for the parity on the selection, on the committee, selection committee, and also on the board. Also, we have made a special partnership with Ballon Rouge, which is parent-friendly organization. And during festivals, they have some special areas where they can welcome children from the parents attending to festivals. Okay, so basically that's what we did during these 2 past years. And now we're going to move to the next media program. So maybe you know that the media program is part of the Creative Europe program, which is lasting 7 years. So in 2021, we will start a new program, global program. And in this next program regarding gender, we would like to move from gender equality to a more open issue, and that we call diversity policy, and which is also, let's say, a non-discrimination policy. And so we can put, of course, gender equality, but also anti-racism, and also, let's say, less privileged population accessing to all position and grants and everything. So we want to continue the holistic approach based on content, business, audience, awareness raising, and policy support. So with the Audiovisual Observatory, we have provided a grant so that the observatory can enlarge and do more studies on gender tagging. Also, with Collective 50/50, we will continue our partnership and make more, let's say, studies in the field. And we also want to launch a campaign next year to give more visibility to all positions for women. Also, with the agency, IACA, we want to have more data. So they're going to tag in the application more information regarding the applicants, and also the content where possible. awareness raising. So as I said, we want to launch this new campaign, and we also want to consolidate the Women on the Move event. But of course, it's been difficult with the conditions due to the COVID. But hopefully, we will be able soon to move into physical events. And also on the business side, we want to go further with the skills and the training skills. So yes, in the new program, we would like to have more actions and support regarding this part. So that's it. Thank you very much again for the invitation. And of course, with Anna, we will be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you very much to you and Anna. That was really interesting to hear what's coming and developing on an ongoing basis from the European Union and the European Commission. And so now we're going to listen to Lesley McKimm from Screen Ireland. And if I invite Lesley to turn on, there she is, turn on the camera, and I'll hand it over to you. Thanks, Lesley.
Thanks, Aoife, and thanks, Orla. Yeah, delighted to be here today. I'll see, can I now do the sharing screen thing as well? Can everybody see that? Okay, yeah, great. So hi, my name's Lesley McKimm. I'm a project manager at Screen Ireland. I've been a project manager there for just about 4 years now. There's 4 of us in that role, and we're across funding projects from development all the way through to production. Prior to that, I was a producer for 20 odd years, mainly on feature films, but also on TV drama and documentary. So an aspect of the role of a project manager, what we all do is to be part of the discussions and the planning and coming up with ideas for different schemes or incentives that can help the industry. And obviously a huge priority over the last number of years has been gender parity issue. So I suppose just to go back, I think Screen Ireland's journey in terms of very concrete policy probably goes back to 2015. And I suppose there was the recognition that we had an issue. I think that really started to come out. It was in Europe, it was in America, but through the gathering of the statistics and institutes like the Gina Davis Institute, we all instinctively felt there was a problem, but I suppose the statistics really showed us that in terms of representations of women on screen and also women behind the camera in the writing and directing roles in particular, there was huge issues there. And I think that galvanized a lot of groups in Ireland and in an Irish context in film. Women in Film and Television was reformed at that time as well. And I suppose trying to then change that mindset to a wider extent, I think the Waking the Feminists a year later in October 2016 was a huge moment, because it was an emotional moment as well, both for men and women, to realize that this was so wrong and something had to be done. So in terms of Screen Ireland, or was Irish Film Board as it was then, they came up with a 6-point plan towards the end of 2015. And I suppose I kind of have called this the statement of intent because it's quite broad, and it covers a lot of areas in terms of policy. All good, data collection and statistics being number one there, and then through to engagement with production companies, enhancing skills, training and mentorship, education initiatives, and working with partners. I think it's interesting looking at that list now, because I think it's always good to kind of go back and say, well, what have we done? What's worked? What do we still have to do? And I think there's quite a lot that actually has been working, and I'll go through that. But there are other areas, I think, even in relation to education and second and third level, working with partners, I think there's more that we can still do to kind of help. So again, I suppose that original 6-point plan was quite broad and covered a lot of bases. And in a way, then I think the messaging became really important. And I think two messages, one which was the industry kind of placed a demand nationally and internationally on us, which was the 50-50 by 2020. And it's great when you can boil things down, you know, that specifically, because I suppose it just kept in everybody's head, we have to try and get the numbers up. So I think that was a very powerful message, and it's obviously still in use today. The other one I think that was powerful, or certainly resonated a lot with me, was the "if she can see it, she can be it" message, and really starting to look at what were the female characters we had on screen, how were they being presented, where was the balance, the Bechdel test, all of those things, you know, which, and I would say this was possibly a more organic change, was very much in conversations with filmmakers about the stories and how women were being presented. So I suppose then we had to hone in on what exactly were we going to do, you know, because in a way those policy ideas, they can be quite broad, and I suppose we actually honed in on, and as we know, there are issues in all areas in terms of gender balance, but what we really focused on was the writing and directing roles, I think, predominantly. And thought, what can we do about that? And one thing that we did do straight away was the gathering of statistics. And what was interesting about the statistics, in a way, there was no surprises in terms of the amount of films that had female writers and directors attached. They were appallingly low. Female producers was better, but it was probably around 30%, so still not equal. But it was the number of applicants, and actually interesting that seeing the media study there as well, the applications from women were way down as well. So that kind of focused the minds on how do we get more people to apply. So we decided in discussion that we would see, would we incentivize, because producers always need money to get films off the ground, they're expensive things to do. So we introduced a female uplift, which was basically for feature films, you could get 50,000 for a female writer, and if 50,000 additional for if a female director was attached. So not an insubstantial sum of money. That's across fiction. In documentary terms, it's 25,000. Now, since 2018 to 2020, that has added up to pretty much €750,000 has been spent specifically on that incentive scheme across productions. We also then decided what could we target some funding initiatives for development and for production. So in terms of production, I suppose the one that we've talked about quite a lot is the POV scheme, which is for female writers and directors. It's around the 400,000 mark, and two of them are in production this year and 2 will be in production next year. One of the 6-point plan's points was how could agencies work more closely together. And I think one scheme that has been working really well, which has been led by TG Cahir, is the CNECT scheme for Irish language feature films, which is CNECT, BAI and ourselves, along with the tax incentive. The 4th round of this was specifically for female writer directors. So we looked within schemes, could we do things at different moments in time? So that was an example of that. And we've done some international development schemes with Luxembourg and with Canada. We also aimed to have 50-50 in writers and directors across our short films, which has been very successful too. Again, I suppose this is a long process to bring people through, you know, and to find the talent, promote them from the earliest stages. And in our case, that's really through our short film schemes and hone in on that. So again, that balance has been working well too. And again, then number 4 there is really, I suppose, again, a kind of an organic one, is to focus on it in every single meeting. So every meeting we have our applications and we highlight how many have come in from women. Now we would still say that when we choose a project for development funding or production funding, it really is based on quality. But having said that, I think to have the awareness all the time of, are we getting the balance, you know, who's in there, I think has just been very, very good in terms of, you know, maybe changing mindsets. There's been a commitment, I suppose, throughout the organisation through Screen Skills in terms of training, mentorship, also to write that into Section 481, that would be part of it. That it would also be across the courses that were run, that there would be balance in people who actually attended the courses, and also gender balance in hiring practices. There's actually quite a lot of women now at Screen Ireland, so we possibly need to go the other way. And in marketing as well, there's been quite a lot of work done in trying to promote women and the work that that they are doing. So I suppose 5 years on now, or or a couple of years on from a lot of these initiatives, how is it going? I think there has been an increase in applicants and films being made with female talent attached, and lots of festival and award success, which I can go into a little bit later. And just in terms of the short films, just some statistics from 2019, there was 14 short films made, 50% with a female writer, 57% with a female director, and 57% with a female protagonist. Actually, just on that, that conversation I often found personally tricky one, talking to sometimes filmmakers about how women were being represented on screen. But again, I think the Me Too movement really helped make that an easier conversation to have. And I think we're seeing, better characters and less overtly sexualized characters. All of those things I think are improving. So just here is some stats from last year. 37% female directors across all funded projects, and 43% female writers across all funded projects. So that's we're not there yet. We didn't get to our lovely 50-50, but it's gotten a lot better, and it's up quite considerably from the figures of 2015, which were 10% and 27% respectively. Just some initiatives. I touched on the POV projects. There was also the Ex-Pollinator, which was funded through Screen Skills and Screen Ireland, which is very successful. And then some heartening, because I suppose just in terms of the number of applicants, that has gone up and down a little bit. It was quite good in 2018. It dipped a bit in 2019. But actually this year there's been some really heartening statistics here, or levels here. We had a number of initiatives around COVID. This year we put an additional 4.5 million funding and diverted it specifically into development and a variety of schemes. And so one of them was this enhanced development scheme, where 71% of the total applicants had female talent attached, which was really, really great. And 81% actually of the, were successful. Then we had 50-50 gender parity on the Spotlight scheme, which is a structured development scheme for new and emerging screenwriters. And also another scheme that we ran this year out of part of these COVID-19 kind of initiatives was a director concept scheme, where 52% of the successful applications were from female directors. So things there's still work to be done, but it does feel like things are moving. This is just some updates from Screen Skills. They've done 160 courses across 2019, 2020, and the breakdown was 41% male, 59% female 2019, 31% male, 69% female 2020. There's some figures there around their mentorship program, the bursary awards. They were 50-50 on their actor as creator scheme. And there's obviously Section 481 skills development. They've been tracking the participants there, and so 51% female, 49% male 2019, and 36 in 2020. So I suppose just in terms of some of the recent successes, there was too many. I was trying to put this together and put in so many female filmmakers and films in the last couple of years, which was actually really heartening, but there was actually too many in a way to include. So I'll just go through a few very, very quickly. But herself obviously appeared at Sundance. It's on release in a few countries now, in Spain and Germany, I think, and it'll go on release in the new year. This was written by Claire Dunn, who's also an actress, and I wanted to talk about it in a way because in terms of what we might do in the future, I thought what was very interesting about this, it was directed by Phyllida Lloyd. Claire had written the screenplay and really didn't expect that she would be in it as the actress. But Phillida had worked with her as an actress, she's a wonderful actress, and ended up coming in to direct it. And Phillida would tell this story herself, because she really wanted to protect what the film was, and she insisted that Claire be in the film. And the heft of somebody, of a director like Phillida Lloyd, just made all the difference. So Claire went on to star in the film, and she's wonderful, wonderful in it. And I suppose it was such an example of women supporting women and championing women in a really strong way. And I think it's kind of an interesting thing to talk about later. The other thing about herself was that they really wanted to have 50-50 on crew. So they almost, I think it was 49% or something in the end. It wasn't quite 50-50 on crew, but again, I think crew is something we need to talk about. So that was kind of interesting there. And then just, I suppose, these are the POV schemes that we talked about. NASA Hardiman Sea Fever did very well, did online. It was supposed to have theatrical release, and COVID put pay to that, but actually it still did really well, and was at Toronto last year. Kathy Brady's Wildfire was at TIFF, was at the London Film Festival in Cork, and it won a fairly major bursary award at LFF. Just in terms of some of the new talent, The Eighth, the documentary, was at Hot Docs and Galway and Cork, and it was an interesting trio of women who wrote, produced, directed and edited. It was a real collaboration between three women, and a girl from Mogadishu, obviously, from Mary McGuckian, which has won numerous awards and is on release today, and a very wide release in cinemas, which is fantastic. So I suppose in terms of where to next, I mean, I feel that what we will continue with the initiatives on gender balance. I think there has been the focus on writing and directing, but we need to broaden out possibly to crew, but also we really need to look at diversity and inclusion. And that's something that we want to put, you know, our thinking to over the next few years, because that is going to take specific schemes and specific incentives to make it work. Because whatever about you know, in terms of women applying for funding, in terms of diversity and inclusion, that's a whole other issue. And I don't believe we are fully representing the Ireland of today on screen or behind the camera the way we should be. So I think that is a focus now over the next couple of years. So in terms of some challenges on gender going forward, I think we still maybe haven't completely got there in terms of production companies always going out and seeking female talent. I think it has improved, but I think there's more to be done. And I think we need to look at family friendly and how to make filmmaking and screen industries more family friendly. I think that's another area we need to focus on. And also, I think there are gatekeepers at every level. So in a way, in Screen Ireland, we're really about you know, development and production predominantly, but we're also across funding for distribution and festivals. And I think internationally, what's going on with festival selections, what's going on with reviewers, with the critics, with awards, I think these are all areas that we actually need to kind of lobby for more change. And that's it from me. I'm happy to take questions later, obviously.
Brilliant, Lesley, thanks so much. That was such an interesting presentation, a lot of information, but
yeah, rattled through it, sorry.
No, it's brilliant. It's just very practical and a lot of detail there. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Olwen Dawe. If you wanted to turn on your camera, Olwen, and we'll hear from you. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Aoife. So now comes the fun part where I do share a screen and hopefully it works. Good morning, everybody. Really delighted to be able to present a little bit of an overview on the Arts Council's Equality, Human Rights and Diversity Policy. If I can now just get my, there we go, perfect. So yes, just to say thanks again to Creative Europe for organising this morning's webinar. I'm really delighted to join Sarah, Anna, Lesley and Lian, as I said, to talk a little bit about the Equality, Human Rights and Diversity Policy at the Arts Council. I'll probably refer to it throughout the presentation as EHRD, just to simplify things. It feels like a very timely discussion, and I look forward to questions in due course. So again, just to say thank you to Katie, Aoife and Orla at Creative Europe. I'm going to briefly talk through the EHRD policy at the Arts Council, which I worked on the development of in 2018, and I'm supporting the implementation of since its publication last year, 2019. The EHRD policy is a core policy of the Arts Council, along with its Paying the Artist policy, also published this year. And both of those policies have champions at board level. So as I said, really critical policies for the organisation. So just to start, really, I thought it'd be useful to give a little bit of context on the policy itself. So why was the policy created when it was? Well, there were a number of reasons why the policy was developed. While the Arts Council has published policies on the arts and cultural diversity, the arts and disability, and had indeed achieved gender balance in many of its own areas of work, it became apparent that a more proactive stance was needed in respect of equality, and in particular gender equality and diversity. So I know there's been a few nods to Waking the Feminists already this morning, and unsurprising, given what a catalytic movement it was. And it's great that Lian is here with us today as well. So as already mentioned, obviously in 2015, Waking the Feminists placed the issue of gender equality squarely on the agenda. As I said, it's brilliant to have Lian moderating today, given her knowledge of this area. But, and not least of all, obviously, the Waking the Feminists 5-year anniversary, which was last month, actually. So Waking the Feminists ignited a critical conversation on the need for gender equality and diversity in theatre and the wider arts community. And a number of sister movements have actually sprung up since, including Sounding the Feminists and Fair Play, both dealing with similar questions of in respect of composing music and traditional music. But also culminating in Waking the Feminists year-long campaign in 2017, the then Minister, Heather Humphreys, so Minister for Culture, tasked all cultural institutions with preparing and implementing a gender equality policy for their respective institution. Furthermore, you'll see here I mentioned the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission's public sector duty, also known as Section 42, which places a legal requirement on all publicly funded agencies and institutions to assess and address any gaps identified within either staffing or service provision in respect of equality and access. So the public sector duty requires that all public bodies eliminate discrimination, promote equality of opportunity, and protect the human rights of those to whom they provide services and staff when carrying out their daily work. So that's a little bit on the context of why the EHRD policy happened when it did. So just to set a little bit of context then in terms of what was involved. So in pursuing the development of the EHRD policy, it was critical that we had cross-organisational engagement in the process. So in the first instance, we established a working group, which was drawn from across the organisation to ensure a range of perspectives were involved. We also initiated, and it's interesting because I know Lesley has spoken about this quite a bit, and also Sarah and Anna did, the requirement around data. So we looked at data, what was available to us, I suppose, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail shortly. But that process helped us to evidence perceived gaps. So I know, again, to Lesley's point about what you perceive to be the case, obviously you need evidence to stack that up. So we had a certain amount of information available to us, which allowed us to, as I said, to evidence what we perceived to be the case. But we also followed that through with a consultative process. So this included a number of meetings with groups such as Waking the Feminists. So again, Lian, sorry, I'm mentioning you again, but both Lian and Sarah Durkin, two key voices in Waking the Feminists, met us in relation to the policy, along with a number of other groups. We also met with civic and representative organisations and some individual artists, all with a very clear focus on intersectionality. So the one thing we were very mindful of was, of course, that gender equality needed to be addressed, but also the wider diversity conversation needed to be included. So it was critical that we understood the experiences of individual artists and communities. The policy was also reviewed by the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission. So we're very thankful for their support in developing it. So what were the key focus areas? So unsurprisingly, data, absolutely top of the list. We were very aware, based on what we had done at that stage in terms of research, that there was a major gap in our systems. We simply needed more information. So when we went looking for it, it wasn't there in the robust way we needed it to be. So in order to accurately make decisions about existing and future policy, we really needed to know who we were funding and who is or isn't applying to us. In addition, it was clear through consultation that there needed to be more clear focus on ensuring our decision-making structures were far more accessible and representative than they had been heretofore. Structures, for example, such as boards and peer panels. We also needed to ensure that we built capacity in the Arts Council and the sector in general in relation to equality, human rights and diversity, and I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. So in terms of what the policy looks like, so you're very welcome to read it. I'm going to include a link shortly on where you can access it. But to give you a snapshot, it encompasses the 9 protected characteristics enshrined in equality legislation. So obviously, very importantly, gender being one of them, civil status, family status, sexual orientation, disability, age, race, religion, and membership of the traveller community. We also included a 10th ground, socioeconomic status. So that is currently in debate as I think potentially having a provision in future equality legislation, but it isn't in place at the moment, but it is included in our policy. There are a total of 28 policy actions which align with the Arts Council's 10-year strategy, Making Great Art Work, under the pillars of the strategy. So they are corporate, artist, public engagement, investment, spatial and demographic, and developing capacity actions. It was launched in March of last year, and implementation of the policy began in September 2019, 6 months before COVID hit. Despite that fact, however, we have achieved a good deal of the action plan to date, and we'll be developing a further action plan in 2022. So just to talk to, I suppose, speak to some of the work in progress to date. So we have seen some significant representational change at council levels, the council being the board of the Arts Council, with 2 new members last year with a very clear focus on diversity and inclusion in their appointment. All Arts Council funded organisations now report on gender balance on their board. So when they're applying, they need to give a breakdown of their board from a gender perspective. And this is a requirement that was set out in the policy. We now report annually on both gender. So as of this year, and you can access the report on our website, we have reported on applicants from 2019. And for next year, it'll be gender and diversity. So as I've mentioned already, data was a major issue. We're now asking, we've asked 3 specific questions of anybody who applies to us. Now, they're not obliged to answer them, but we ask about the individuals, how they identified in terms of gender, ethnicity, and disability. So it does provide us with a more robust insight on who's applying to us. We're also running a pilot survey process currently with our festivals team to understand the diversity of both artists and audiences that festivals are working with. And in August this year, we held a substantial artist consultation, which added further focus to our action plan. We were delighted to have, I think, in the region of 55 artists join us for individual focus group conversations on both our policy and also our focus into the future on equality, human rights and diversity. All strategically funded organisations across all art forms are asked about their EHRD activity in this year's application. So they're asked to tell us what they are doing currently, what they plan to do, and how they're going to implement it. And we also have a peer panel diversification process underway. So obviously, one of the crucial things that we were aware of and put into the policy, and it has come through again in our consultation in August, was the need to ensure that decision-making structures are representative of our society and our artists. So that is a process that's underway currently. We will also have an equality, human rights and diversity toolkit made available next year for all organisations working in the arts. So, come on, slides, move for me. So where to next? So what are our plans for 2021 and beyond? Well, over the coming year and beyond, we will be continuing to progress the EHRD policy, and following a recent consultation, as I mentioned, with over 50 artists from a range of diverse backgrounds and perspectives, we've placed an additional emphasis on a number of actions. We'll be focusing more on disassembling what a lot of people have referred to as the closed shop in the arts, by ensuring opportunities are made accessible to all, including piloting new application approaches. So applications were suggested to us throughout the consultation process as prohibitive for certain cohorts, and we really were very mindful of a need to look at that and change it. We will be, as I've mentioned already, opening up the peer panels through a revised call-out approach and other schemes and measures that we are still working through. So there will be a number of pilots in our plan for next year. We're also going to be maintaining a consistent focus on the quality of engagement. Artists are being offered through funded organisations in order to avoid tokenism or ticking the diversity box, as it has been phrased. Of course, the partnership approach is always key to the success of any policy, and we will work with the sector through our art form teams to promote diversity and inclusion, as well as providing tools, including the planned EHRD toolkit and other forms of awareness and capacity development. As already mentioned, data collection is critical for us in order to ensure that the policy is having the impact it was designed to have. So thank you so much for your patience while I make my way through the presentation and for your attention. I'm very happy to have any questions at the end here. I know that Lian is going to be moderating a conversation, but equally, if anybody would like to contact me, that's my email address at the Arts Council. And if you'd like to look at the policy or read it in more detail, it's available in the top 10 spoken languages in Ireland, as well as a large print version and an ISL signed introduction to the policy. So please feel free to take a look there if you wish. And as I said, I'm more than happy to take any further questions. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Olwen. That was really interesting. And we'd like to invite all the speakers back on. So Lian and Anna and Sarah and Lesley, please, and obviously Katie and Orla, and we'll start the panel discussion when we're ready. Thanks everybody for those. I'll hand it over to you, Lian.
Sure. Thank you so much, Aoife. And a huge thank you to everybody who's presented today. I think I find it quite extraordinary to be listening to so much activity in a relatively short space of time. When I remember about 4.5 years ago, so Waking the Feminists kicked off 5 years ago, more or less last month, as Olwen said. And in the following months, we were starting conversations with the Arts Council and with theatre organisations in Ireland. And at the time, this was a brand new conversation at that level. In terms of policy, it was a brand new conversation. As Lesley mentioned, the Screen Ireland's, what she was calling the statement of intent, came out more or less the week of the first Waking the Feminists event. So there was this incredible convergence of intention, which was wonderful and did create this kind of peer pressure moment, I think, across the arts sector, which has pushed this agenda so far. So it's really kind of incredible to listen in an encapsulated way, all the work that's been going on. I want to come back to Anna in a second, because she talked a little bit about a study that they did around women artists, and I want to ask her a little bit about that. But I suppose before I get to that, I kind of want to ask the hard question, which is around accountability. So we, in Waking the Feminists, one of the things was to have policies in place, to encourage theatre organisations to have policies in place, and to monitor them and to measure them. But there's always been this question about accountability, in the sense that if people do not step up to their own plate that they have, the policy that they have put out themselves, what happens then? And I would love to just hear from Lesley and Olwen a little bit about that. I know it's a tricky subject, but it's something that I think is really key.
Go for it, Lesley.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I suppose we publish our statistics, so I think we publish what's been happening every year. So the 2020 ones haven't come out yet, but then people can see how have we been doing on this measure of gender balance in those roles, and can say why not. And I suppose at board level, it is part of every discussion, and the statistics are always, so there's internal measures that go on all the time, and I suppose what they mean is that you then have to maybe pivot or go, well, what else can we do, you know? And I suppose that's where I think I'm kind of interested in second level and third level and other areas that we might need to tap into to make more change, you know?
Lian, yeah, I think the important thing to say is that, you know, the EHRD policy is now being embedded in terms of strategically funded organizations, and I suppose that's where the real power is, that, you know, strategically funded organizations need to be taking a lead in the sector. So for this year, obviously last year in the application form, it was, you know, quite a light touch question. It was, you know, do you have an EHRD policy or an equality policy? And it was, you know, yes, no, or it's in progress. Whereas this year, it's really, you know, we're asking people to tell us about their activity. You know, what is it you're doing? So it's being built year on year. And I suppose, you know, the idea being that from next year, you know, the question will be, well, show us the evidence of what you've done. If you said last year you were doing A, B, C, or D, where are you with that? And while it's not being counted towards, you know, an overall mark, if you like, in the application this year, in future years it will be, you know. So I mean, in terms of accountability, it's taken extremely seriously. And as I mentioned in the presentation, you know, the HRD policy has champions on the council, so, you know, it's the whole way through the organization. And I suppose we, you know, it's the carrot and stick. It's like, you know, we're preparing a toolkit for you, we're supporting you, we want you to tell us if you're having difficulties with this area, but also, you know, you need to take it seriously. This is, you know, it's going to be like, you know, have you got a child protection policy in place? It's going to be that significant into the future, absolutely.
I think that's great. And I think it's so important to understand that this is not, these things are not flash in the pan, or they're not a passing trend, that it's something like, Lesley, you talk about the fact that gender equality is a conversation that comes up regularly in meetings, and that it's kind of scheduled in as part of the conversation. I think all organizations really need to make sure that, I mean, this is my own personal opinion, all organizations need to make sure that gender equality and diversity are just a topic of conversation that recur, and that there's the understanding that it's not something, you know, we've written this policy or we've made this decision, great, it's done. This is something that's going to take years, and it's going to take time, and it's going to take energy. So for people to make sure that they're factoring in dedicated time to look at this, I think is hugely important at all levels, whether we're talking about funders, whether we're talking about individual organizations, and even artists individually themselves. Like, it's a part of your thinking that you need to dedicate time to. That's my little rant for the moment. I wanted to come back to Anna, because you briefly mentioned a study that was made on the situation of women artists in the EU, and I know you didn't have time to talk about it in the presentation, so I'd love to hear a little bit about what the findings were for that, and also how you see that as being different, how the situation within the cultural sector is different to other sectors.
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Indeed, I would like to briefly take you through the findings of the study. I am wondering how much they will be a surprise for you, for people actually working in the cultural and creative sectors. But to us, to policymakers, they were quite a shock, I must say. I just remember seeing the faces of my colleagues, of the representatives of the member states, to whom the findings of the study were presented. Basically, we were all in a deep shock. And of course, the study was based on the desk research. The contractors also interviewed practitioners from different sectors in different member states. But of course, they came across the major obstacle of the lack of data, and or at least lack of comparable data. The situation varies a lot among different member states. Some member states are quite diligent in collecting information, but it started maybe not long ago. So the data is not very going back very much in history. Some member states do not collect data, or they do collect, but it's not gender disaggregated. So it's been a challenge, and that was the first caveat that basically the contractors presented when they were talking about the study. But basically, the main objective of the study was to look at the gender gaps hampering equal participation of women artists and professionals. in creative sectors in the European Union in different member states. They also looked into specific initiatives that are, launched in different sectors to ensure gender equality. But basically, the aspects of gender inequalities that they looked into were gender stereotypes, access to decision-making and leadership roles, access to resources and the gender pay gap, access to the arts labor market, and sexual harassment. And they concluded that across the different subsectors of culture and creative world, some types of gender inequality are more prevalent in some than in other subsectors due to the specificities. The situation is different in architecture, for example, and live performance, because these are completely different activities, let's say. And some of the drivers of the gender gaps are cross-sectoral and quite universal, while the others are exactly more sector-specific. And well, it's nothing surprising, but they also started by comparison, saying that the culture and creative sectors have the reputation of being inspirational, innovative, and also informal, accessible, and egalitarian. But it is not necessarily true that it is the case when it comes to gender equality. And actually, these characteristics might in reality create a fertile ground for gender inequalities and other sorts of discrimination. So, for example, when we go into stereotypes, basic finding was that women's creative contributions are usually less valued than those of men. And women, in fact, tend to be viewed more as vessels of men's creative outputs rather than creators in their own right. Even though across sectors there tend to be more women in the educational trajectories, in most cases, ultimately, there are less women present in the employment in those sectors. Because as the age increases, the proportion of women present in the sector in employment declines. When it comes to access to leadership positions, for example, men seem to be more prevalent in creative and decision-making roles, as well as in more famous or important cultural institutions. And this happens even in the sectors where women outnumber men in absolute numbers. And for example, a study carried out in France in 2018 found that 52% of the students in education preparing for performing arts were women, but only 31% of practicing artists were female, 11% of programmed artists were female, only 18% of managerial positions were occupied by women, and only 4 to 12% of rewarded artists were female. So yeah, we can see that there is a clear, huge yawning gap here. Now, when it comes to resources, well, the cultural and creative sectors are known as flexible, project-based. They have project-based styles of working, and people face tight deadlines, erratic working hours. They need time to invest in resources, in self-promotion, networking, traveling, and touring. And of course, it's rather unsurprising that in these conditions, many women struggle to keep up the pace, and care obligation, obviously, they are still, well, predominantly taken over by women. So they have less opportunity to maintain networks, to attend informal networking events, or to engage into self-promotion and networking, etc. And of course, also there are less programs of mentoring to women. They appear to be relatively in relatively short supply. Now, of course, there is a clear gender pay gap, which is also to some degree closely tied to the fact that women on average have less access to higher or more senior positions, that they have to take maternity leave somewhere on the way, which then also has an impact on pension. Women are also less likely to grow vertically in their occupations, the famous glass ceiling. And again, the creative output produced by women tends to be less valued and appreciated than those of men. And now when we come to the sexual harassment, the experts identified 4 main contextual factors which drive and facilitate the sexual harassment. And they are quite particular to the culture and creative sectors. And they are the competition for work, the industry culture, the sort of informality, coolness, leads to gendered power relations in many cases. And then, yes, the importance of informal networks also creates a lot of space for actually unwanted, undesired sexual behavior. So, yes, so I think these were quite shocking findings when it comes to the gaps. The study, of course, comes with a series of general recommendations. And the first one, again, relates the data, the lack of data. We need comparable sets of data from different member states, which are broken down by particular sectors, because Eurostat, for example, collects sex disaggregated data, but they are not broken down into like very specific sectors. So yeah, so I must say this study was quite a shock, but definitely I think it also helped us to raise attention, and our commission is also alerted. She's very much interested in changing the situation, and we will see how it will go. But yeah,
I think it's a huge lesson to learn for everybody, which is around keeping data. You know, making sure that you yourself, in terms of your own organization, in terms of your own work, no matter what scale you are, the importance of counting, keeping the data, so that then when it's aggregated, people can look across the sector and they look across different countries. So that's like a huge thing I would say to anybody who's listening is, you know, please just try and make sure that you're at least annually collating your own data. I know that Anna's there has been a link put up to that in the chat if people want to look at any of those, that study in more detail.
Yes, Anna, I will just tell you that the experts underlined that actually the study is very much Ireland and UK based, UK centered, because the data apparently available in UK and Ireland is of very good quality. I'm sure there's a lot of space for improvement, but there are a lot of good practices from Ireland as well, and Waking the Feminists comes across the report as well. But of course, I mean, there's still a lot to be done.
And Waking the Feminists, the study that Waking the Feminists was able to commission thanks to the Arts Council's funding, that was the first time any of that kind of data has been collected on theatre ever in Ireland. So it's, you know, it's only recently that we're able to do that, and there has not been a kind of a systemic collection of data since, except by individuals on a sort of ad hoc basis. So I think that's something that's hugely important at a broader level. Whether it's the Arts Council, you know, whether it's a separate data collection body, I'm not sure, but I think it's really, really important that that keeps being collected, so then we can measure change, because otherwise we've no idea whether things are advancing or whether they're retreating. I realize we're very short on time, and I know there's lots of questions. I wanted to just pick up one thing that's come up a couple of times, which is around the stereotyping, and I think is particularly pertinent when we're talking about creative sectors and when we're talking about representation. I know a lot of the work that's happened in terms of the policies, the gender equality policies that have been made, not just by the Arts Council and Screen Ireland and so on, but also across all of the national cultural institutions, are looking at the structures of the organization. And the a trickier side to the conversation is also around the representation of women within the work, whether it's on stage, whether it's on screen, whether, you know, if we're talking about museums, the stuff that's hanging on the walls, that's being displayed, so on. I know that's, again, it's a slightly tricky conversation, but I'd love to hear a little bit. Lesley, you touched a little bit on it. I'd love to hear a little bit more about how how both of you, how your organizations are you starting those conversations? How are you starting those conversations? And what role do you see yourselves having within that sort of cultural change?
Yeah, it's a funny one because we haven't necessarily pinned it to you must have, 50-50 within your script. We haven't done that. So I suppose it's been conversations face to face, and I've had loads of them, in terms of with filmmakers. And I remember one story, and I think it was a sci-fi, and it was all men. And I said, you can't do that anymore. You can't have all men. And he ended up flipping a couple of the roles, and actually the whole story became even stronger because of that, obviously, but it was really interesting. And so often, I suppose, I do talk about and try and challenge where are the women, why I think when it can get a bit trickier is sometimes you have a lot of older men with younger women, scenes like that, or and I'm going, why is there the age gap? And sometimes you meet a certain amount of incomprehension there that is difficult, and I found it hard. I had to have the confidence to bring those things up, and I suppose that's why I found Me Too did change things a little bit, because you felt like you had permission to bring those things up, and even, and I've talked about this on different panels quite a bit, but even around rape, a lot of, scenes around rape, going, why do you have to do that? Is it absolutely necessary? Obviously, sometimes it is for the story, but sometimes it wasn't, and so I have found that what we do is we're doing that in conversation with filmmakers as the scripts and the stories are coming through, and trying to challenge a change in attitudes. But I do think Me Too was a shift in people went, oh, okay, I mightn't fully understand all of this, but I know it's a problem, and I know I have to listen. So I think that has helped. But I don't know how, with Olwen or others might have other approaches.
I don't know, actually, what I was just going to suggest. I know there was a question came in earlier on, and I'm conscious of time that needed to be answered in relation to Speak Up and Call It Out, which is the project that the Irish Theatre Institute launched in 2017, 2018, following Me Too making its way to Ireland. So I think the question was addressing me in relation to the EHRD work, and whether there had been follow-up on wider sectoral issues around bullying and harassment. And the answer to that question is yes. Actually, the ITI, Irish Theatre Institute, are leading out on the second phase of Speak Up and Call It Out as a sector-wide initiative. So I think the person who asked the question was speaking to the issue of bullying and harassment in literature. And I know that, just have the note here in front of me, that both Words Ireland and the Irish Writers Centre have attended a meeting with ITI to talk about the next phase of Speak Up and Call It Out, which actually, to Anna's point, will include a sector-wide survey in the new year, just to really understand, again, data is the thing, isn't it? We keep talking about it, but to really evidence the issues that as they're happening and have happened historically across the sector. So I wanted to just chip in with that now before I forget.
Totally. And I think, I suppose talking about that, the sort of idea of content and what actually gets to our screens and gets to our stages. Screen Ireland is in a different position to the Arts Council, in the sense that obviously, Lesley, Screen Ireland has a hand and an ongoing conversation with makers as they are making their work, whereas the Arts Council tends to be more a purely funding body. So there is a different type of conversation going on in those two areas. I still think it's a hugely important conversation to have, and it's something that certainly in Waking the Feminists we didn't, in terms of our research, we didn't look at what was on stage in terms of stereotyping, or in terms of the type of characters or type of stories. And I think that's a very whether it's down to peer conversations at the moment before we get into something a little bit more formal. I still think it's a slightly unaddressed area that still needs to be talked about.
I mean, just one small thing, I suppose, on the positive side, again, I suppose we're actively pushing stories that have strong female characters. So something like the Katie Taylor documentary, like, you know, there were so many reasons for doing that, but one was just, you know, to absolutely be right in there with such a positive female role model. So we do really actively look for projects with positive female characters and role models in them as well.
I'm aware we do have a few questions. I don't know, Aoife, if you want, like, I'll keep an eye on some of these, but there might be ones that slipped through my net. Just because I'm aware we're officially finishing at 12:30. I suppose if we run a few minutes over and people need to slip away, that's absolutely fine. But let me check through some of the actual questions that are coming up. So some of them are about where people can access information. A lot of the links are now up in the chat and so on. There's a question here, particularly for Lesley, which is saying, when will section 481 contain the female talent initiatives?
Sorry, trying to unmute. Now, I'm not a total expert in this area. So as far as I know, the female talent initiatives are totally knitted into the regional uplift and everything that's going on with screen skills. So in a wider context, though, I'm not sure I have the answer to that, but I can find out and send it back to Orla.
Great. I think, yes, that question about the speak up and call it out, we just came to. There's another question here as well, Lesley, which I think actually is interesting, because you mentioned on herself, on the film, the production herself, that they specifically, as a production company, they decided that they wanted to try and aim for 50-50 in terms of the crew, which I think is really laudable and also like crucial that we're talking about the backstage as well. So there's a question here which is about whether Screen Ireland has been measuring the gender balance of crew on a whole.
Not enough. You know, these are the areas where you want more to delve into more statistics, and certainly as well, I think we really want to, and we've talked about this, get into diversity as well, you know, be in front in what's being made and behind the screen. So not enough, but I suppose we are tracking it, and you know, like DOP, we know composer, like 2% or something worldwide, you know, female composers. Like there's some areas that are really not there, you know, so I think that's another area that we'd love to kind of address is on those HODs and on the crew, you know, and those stereotypes, maybe, you know, to use that word, that, you know, you can't have a female DOP. I think that's absolutely changing, and normal people and everything with 2 female DOPs, but there's a lot of work to be done there, I think.
I just have let me see, another question in here from Aideen for Olwen specifically, which is talking about gender balance on boards, committees and programs. And the organization that this one is talking about has a female-led program, and was wondering about the legitimacy of focusing on female-led leadership or female leadership and programming until equality is more achievable or more achieved. As in, do programs or do boards, committees and programs have to always be looking at 50-50 in terms of the Arts Council's eyes, or is kind of pushing it further in the view that historically we've been very male-led? For a while, is it okay for it to be more female-led?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because actually it's come up. We've been talking about this ourselves in the last few weeks, just looking ahead to the strategically funded applications coming in. And now that boards of organisations have to be declared in the application form, the really good news is, and I would again, you know, hat tip to Lian and Waking the Feminists, because I think this was a big part of the conversation around decision-making structures and the role they play in how organisations operate. We're seeing a lot more gender balanced boards. Now we are seeing also gender imbalanced in favor of more women on the boards than men. Now, we still have a little of the other as well, but I think our view would be, 60-40 is good news, because for long enough it was the exact opposite. And I think in terms of just on the programming piece, actually, and again, I'd reference, I think this was one of the conversations that was had with the Abbey around, them reporting their stats, that actually, you can be looking within a window, a 5-year window, for example. If you want to achieve gender equality over 5 years, it might mean some years you have more women directing shows or writing shows, and then maybe there's a dip the following year, but it's an overall figure. So I don't know if those 2 points kind of help cater to that particular question, but I suppose you wouldn't find me being terribly upset if somebody said, well, look, we have a board of 11 and six of the members are female and 5 are male. I think I would find that fairly acceptable.
There's another question, I suppose, as well, sort of Arts Council focused, which is around the fact that there are other kinds of funding streams other than venue and strategic funding, in terms of sort of bursary projects, art grants going to individuals, and how the policy is being monitored in those areas.
Yeah, I think my colleague Monica Corcoran was on the session today as well, and I think she sought to try and respond to that as well. So, I mean, there is absolutely, people are funded outside of just, being employed on projects by funded organisations. We are, as a result of the consultation we did in August, looking at piloting certain types of approaches to ensure that the applications are more representative of the diversity of Irish artists. But currently, really the main thing for us is, and I know I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but it is data. This is the first year that actually we've been asking people to tell us a bit more about themselves, to tell us a little bit about how they identify their ethnicity, whether they have a disability. So that really will give us a sense as to where we are, and to be able to then perhaps even set soft targets for ourselves to start to look actively at why we're not getting applications from certain communities. So I think Monica may have put in a note on that as well in the chat, but just to say it is something that we're very mindful of, and we are trying to actually look at a way of, I suppose, putting in place targets that are respectful as well, because there is a sense, and to refer to our consultation in August, we had mirror opposite responses from the artists we engaged with. Some artists felt that we needed to put actual quotas in place, and others felt that was going to be ghettoizing and siloing. So it's about trying to balance those two things, and be very mindful of the need to ensure we're accessible and open, but not be in some way insensitive in the way that we maybe try and achieve outcomes that are more representative.
Yeah, I think that last point about being accessible and open is absolutely key, and I think the data is the key to that. And again, I'm just going to wrap up with the very last. I'm sorry, I know I'm skipping a couple of questions, and I apologize. It's just running out of time. But just because we're still, we have been talking about sort of the data collection around how funding is divided in terms of male and female applicants, but also what the different amounts in terms of funding have been applied for by different male and female applicants. I think all of that kind of data collection and what can be then made public is going to help. Are both of you looking at the sort of breakdown of the money, where the money goes?
Yeah, I mean, I can just say on that, Lian, like I mentioned it in the presentation, but we are reporting, it's in the policy. Currently, our first report is on the website, which is just on gender. And next year we'll have a breakdown according to the new questions we're asking. The one thing I would say, and I know Screen Ireland, I think, may have had this challenge. I know Enterprise Ireland did. Women tend to ask for less money. It's very frustrating, but it's true. And we've seen that in the data report we ran this year. We do actually have a good balance in terms of the applications, but the money is less because women are asking for less. I remember a long time ago working with Enterprise Ireland on a programme which was like Screen Ireland's, very much a call out for female-led startups. and the person who was leading it in EI said every time, you know, she would get an application and like she could literally put them side by side, male, female, and she would know which one was from a woman, because they would be asking for proportionately less than their male colleagues. So we really, I think there needs to be more mindfulness, you know, around that from people applying as well. Like, apply for what you need, please.
I think I apologize. I know I'm skipping some of the questions. Olwen's already put up her contact details there if anyone's got specific questions that can be directed to her. I'm sure Lesley's available to answer some as well. So I will, I guess, hand back to Aoife for any kind of wrap up that needs to be done. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Lian. I think, yeah, we could be here for a few days. Some really great questions, and obviously, yeah, as answered as much as we could. I'm going to hand it over to Katie and Orla just for, yeah, some closing remarks. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Aoife. Thanks, everyone. It was fascinating. I could actually sit here for hours listening to you all, but that would be selfish. So I wanted to say, because I know there were some questions we didn't get to, and we'll try to kind of collect them and then answer them in the follow-up email. So we'll also, everyone's contact details are available, but also we will send on the presentations after. I just had a couple of kind of takeaways or you know, kind of thoughts from listening to everything. So obviously the first thing is it's really clear that there's a lot of alignment between national policy initiatives and kind of objectives and European policy objectives and initiatives. And that, I think, puts us in a really good position in a way, you know, because what Anna was saying, and I thank Anna and Sarah so much for coming and taking the time. But, you know, what she was saying is actually, we're kind of farther along in terms of our policy frameworks, in terms of the data we've collected than many countries within the countries participating in the program. And I think that's really key as well as we look ahead to the next program, because really, you know, if your organization or your practice or your work is in this field or interested in engaging in this way, or it's something you've kind of committed to, which increasingly is going to be a requirement from national funders, then by taking part in European projects and collaborating across borders, you're really increasing and leveraging your capacity to achieve those kind of national targets and national and personal kind of objectives within your work. So just all very, very positive. And again, there's a couple of events. The Culture Office is having an event next Thursday on Zoom. It's a Creative Europe showcase and a publication launch of our case studies from the past 3 years of Creative Europe. And Angela Dorgan from the Key Change Project, which I mentioned, will be presenting. So that might be of interest to you. I don't know if Orla, if you want to mention you have an event as well.
We have an event. It's a North-South collaboration event with the Belfast Creative Europe office. And it's focused really on animation and VR. So that's happening next Tuesday, and you can go on our website to see how to register for that. And I just wanted to say as well, and I think, Lian, you've said the point a few times, that it really is about data collection. And it's very clear the difference that has made. I mean, like within the last 5 years, I mean, we literally started with very little 5 years ago, and how far it's come already in those years. And now there's something really strong to build on. So I think that's really, really important. And it's very, very obvious that both Screen Ireland and the Arts Council and the EU as well are really working on building that fast. And then it's from gender, then it goes to diversity, and then it's all the other areas that need to be dealt with as well. But yeah, so I just want to take this opportunity as well to thank BAI as well for their sectoral development funding that this event has. It was supposed to be a physical event, so you know, hopefully this time next year we will all be sitting in a room somewhere having coffee or having breakfast, something. Yeah, so from our point of view, I just want to say thank you to all our panelists and all our attendees. And like Katie said, you know, the presentations will be available, and this will be recorded as well and be up on our website. So thank you so much to everyone.
Thanks. Bye.
Do we finish up
Thank
now?
you.
Okay. Cheers.
Thanks,
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you for the invitation.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.